it's almost like a magical realm, like a fantasy novel that some people happen to live in, and then the rest of us normal regular people are living in.
But look at
So
the stuff even with like with Chris Columbus, where everyone's like, "Oh, Columbus Day." Yeah,
he
no,
didn't even make it here. He did not even make it. He did not even step foot here.
he
Okay.
he thought this. He also thought this was India,
So,
and
God,
like his maps were wrong, and then all of the R wording and pillaging and.
we don't need to go into that because
But that's my point that I was trying to make was, a lot of white people in history books are like, he was so great, he discovered stuff. No, he didn't. Mm-mm, no.
that's why I get confused, and that's why I wanted to kind of talk about this because we are literally fighting and trying to argue against people that are not even seem to be living in the same world.
I mean, I've said before that America is not going to survive if we don't admit the truth of how this country was started. And people need to get out of their feelings. This is not about you and your individual behavior and you and your personal feelings. We are not responsible for the actions of our ancestors. We are responsible for how we respond and how we do better. And so I don't understand why Jillian Michaels wants to parse facts and distort the truth to make herself feel better. Like the guy said, this is not about all white people. This is about a system, a system that is a problem. And we're not going to make this better if people can't admit what the truth is.
And so as somebody who knows Jillian a little bit, it's crazy because she was on obviously my season. I had Bob as my trainer, but she was there. I didn't really work with her a lot. We toward the end, we got to know each other a little bit better because there was less people. But the thing that I believe about Jillian and a lot of these conservative talk hosts, because I also have a bit of a personal connection to Glenn Beck, which sounds insane. But his head writer and co-host Stu's wife, Lisa Page, used to be one of my closest friends. We worked together at Q102 in Philly. I was very close friends with Stu, was at parties at Glenn's, and would always joke before 2020, oh, Lisa and Stu, the only conservatives that I like, right? Because there really is a divide in the world of like before Trump and after. And even more so like for 2020 and after, right? It's like you can't exist in a world. I hate when people say like, oh, respect people's opinions. Well, no, like it's not about that anymore. So for somebody like Jillian and people part in that world, we brought up Charlie Kirk, like I really do believe it's about money and fame for them, and it's about notoriety. Nobody was talking about Jillian Michaels. She was non-existent. Jillian Michaels was the face of the fitness industry in the 2000s, right? From 2002 to say 2017, like no one was bigger than her, right? And then social media exploded and TikTok exploded and Instagram and YouTube. And there's all these new faces of fitness and no one was talking about Jillian Michaels anymore. And Jillian Michaels wants to be famous. And she knew if she went down this path because she saw it. Remember, it kind of started with Lizzo. Remember, she was making comments about Lizzo. And
Mm-hmm.
then and she realized, oh, I'm going to be, this is like maybe 2 or 3 years ago. Oh, if I'm controversial, people will talk about me again. I'll be in the news again. Then she started like a year or two ago, but the weight loss drugs, right? And now and then she kind of like dipped her toe. She started with like the Maha movement, right? Like
Oh,
trying to be on the healthy track. And then she realized, oh, I'm famous again. I'm making money again. And so, and let me also add that she has a black daughter that she adopted from Haiti. So, and she's a lesbian. So, like,
I
she
knew
is a
about the lesbian part. I didn't know about the
yeah, yeah,
daughter
yeah.
part.
Yeah, oh, yeah, yeah. So she had a son with her then wife that I think is biologically her ex-wife's son, biologically her egg, but
Hmm.
she adopted her daughter from Haiti. And to me, that is just such negligence as a parent, as a mother. And, I think in her mind, does she believe everything she's spewing? No, I don't, but I think that that makes it almost worse where she's doing it for money and she's doing it for fame because she knows that we're talking about her. Look, we're talking about her again. We would have never talking about Jillian Michaels even 3 or 4 months ago. And so I think that it's hard for me because it really does fill me with rage. Um, and I think if you see a lot of those people in that space, it really started with like Rush Limbaugh, right? Where he realized if I say something, all these people are going to pay 19.99 a month to like listen to what I have to say. Because the reality is that obviously like MAGA is real, the Trump cult is real, people really believe this, but these people who are multi-millionaires, like they know, right? They're looking at it from, a business perspective, which to me makes it even worse. And the Jillian thing is really it's also strange timing because of the Biggest Loser documentary coming out, and she's now kind of like, but she wasn't in it. She wasn't in the documentary. She declined to be in it.
Hmm.
Um, and I'm sure part of it, here and there could have been the fact that, she believes some of it, but I think she knows what's going to put her in the news. And then the problem is that people latch onto it. And now here we are, and it has legs. And that's the problem. Is that it's
Yeah, no, and it's been something that's been growing legs for a long time. So she
yeah,
saw her grift, she saw her money grab. I
yeah,
didn't know who this bitch was until like a few days ago. Like I'm
yeah,
gonna keep it a bean until I seen her say some dumb shit on the internet. You know what I mean? On CNN of all places, where they
yeah,
allow this woman to come on and say something like that
yes,
next to a black man of
yes,
and it's just wild to me, and miss me with the all white people don't do this. Okay, we get that. If you ain't that white person that is about that life, that spits that rhetoric, then you know that.
right.
And if you really need that validation for somebody else to tell you that we're not talking about you, then maybe we are talking about you, and then maybe you need to evaluate your life. So, you know what I mean? Like,
And I do
it's
think
so simple.
um what Keisha, what you said about, if we do not fix this, like, will the country survive? And then what you said, May, about CNN allowing her to do it. And I think that's such a bigger part of the conversation too, is that we live in this society of hot takes. And these companies, whether they lean liberal or lean conservative, like they still want the clicks, they still want the ad buys, they still want the money. And there used to be a responsibility of the news to be a way where they're like, we're just going to give you the facts, we're just going to give you what's happening. And it's like now CNN wants us to talk about it, right? And so
Yeah.
they'll invite Jillian on and they'll have these insane conversations. And that also frustrates me to no end too, because I'm like, why are we letting this
They
happen?
don't even really have conversations as much as it's just a screaming match around a
Yeah,
table,
I know.
at this point.
And
I
Scott
know.
Jennings just looking at the camera like,
I know. And I understand that like you need more voices because there's so many of them, with the red pill, with the white men in the conservative space. But then you look at somebody like Candace Owens, right? Who goes
oh,
into that
mm.
space and then once Ben Shapiro fired her, then she's like, uh-oh, what am I gonna do now? Now she's like latching on to such, she did the whole Blake Lively and Justin Baldoni
Well,
thing.
look at what she did with Emmanuel Macron's wife.
Right.
Trying
That's what
to
I'm saying.
like,
Like,
but I think something that we need to,
We don't claim her.
I think something that like we need to realize, and I know that you and I have talked about your Biggest Loser experience. That what you saw was what pretty much went on, but reality TV, at least in the last like 10, 15 years, is not what's really going on. And I think that like that's the reality of TV that like this administration is trying to live in, when the real reality is not that at all. A lot of reality TV now is just scripted, even though it's reality. So that's just what they're trying to do in DC.
And I mean, and they've been pretty successful. Keisha, do you wanna run that Van Lathan?
Did you know that only less than 2% of white Americans owned slaves? But it was a system of white supremacy. I want everybody to know this. We don't think that y'all ancestors was the only people that had slavery. It's just for all the, we don't think that. But that right there is an important lesson about why you need to understand history. So I'm going to shoot Jillian some bail, and I'm going to assume right now. You're giving her too much. I apologize, Rachel. God damn it. I'm going to assume that she doesn't know what she's talking about and not that she's purposefully saying untrue things. Okay. Here's the deal. I am not smart, but I can read. I'm not Mark Lamont Hill, not at all, but I can read. Right. So let's take that claim for a second. Only 2% of white people participated in slavery. That's a quaint way to look at the American experiment of slavery. When we are talking about slavery, we're talking about the involvement of slavery in the American economy. For somebody like Jillian, she thinks, okay, the white people that were involved in slavery are the white people who owned slaves. Mm-hmm. What if you owned a newspaper and in that newspaper, you advertised slave auctions? Mm-hmm. What if you owned an insurance company and that insurance company insured slaves? What if you owned a shipping company and that shipping company shipped slaves? What if you are a part of not direct enslavement of African people, but the economic infrastructure that benefits from the direct enslavement of African people? Sorry, you're a part of slavery. By the way, there are numbers behind that. There are estimates that at the peak of American dependence on slavery, you're seeing around 20 or 30% of the American economy involved in slavery, right? If you transport that number today, that is $8 trillion. Mm. And that doesn't even begin to contextualize the global industry of slavery, where cotton alone is so dependent on by some other nations. Us moving away from the slave trade is changing their financial systems. So many things that they are depending on the American South for, that there are political ramifications in the freedom of Black people. There are cultural ramifications in it. Jillian just doesn't understand the issue. Mm-hmm. Either that or she's lying. I would venture to believe that she just doesn't know what the fuck she's talking about. And that's why history is important. Not so you can find out who is to blame for it. The scope of the issue lets you understand the condition of Black people after that and what would have to be done to reinvest into a community that legitimately suffered billions of lashings for trillions of dollars. You cannot tie.
Thank you, sir, for just laying it out straight. I appreciate you. Appreciate you, sir. Dive in. Keisha, you were the one that shared this. So go ahead.
Yeah. I just think it was really important to have that context because whether or not Jillian is lying, whether she's a grifter, just like the president, it's important that we dispel these myths and these lies because there are people who are listening to her and using the same rhetoric and arguments and to be in denial and to pretend like we don't have the problems that exist. And so I really appreciate that Van broke it down the way that he did and applied it to you can own a shipping company, you can own a paper. Like this entire country was built on the back of slavery and people who were enslaved. And you can't deny that. And it's sturdy. No one wants to think that people could be so callous, but look at what's happening right now with people who are in immigration detention centers, which may as well be prisons. We're all unfortunately complicit in this, whether we want to be or not.
Yeah, and then also just that again, there's that reality coming right back around. Like you said, it's foundational. We are built on this whether you like it or not. So there's no running away from where this country is built on, and the only way we can fix it is by addressing it and being real about the actual issue. Ain't nobody saying that you were a slave owner, but we have to recognize, like, you can't fix a problem without realizing and recognizing what the problem was to fix. Otherwise you're just going around on a dummy mission.
People need to stop like thinking that history is like these Disney movies and it's all like magical and happy. There's a lot of history in this country and in the world that is hard, and it's hard to listen to, and it's hard to take, and it's hard for the people that went through what they went through. It's not all comfortable, but we have to know the truth. We can't be making stuff up.
Well, I think it's scary when, like it was, if you go back 5 years even, like I think if you did an anonymous survey, 90% of the country would be like, slavery is horrible. Like that is just what it was. And it's like when you give all these people a platform and you give all these grifters, and kind of going back to the whole grifter conversation, it's like they are saying these words and people are believing it, and people are now like, that's, I think, what's so like overwhelming to me is the amount of people that like believe it and live it and then like make it their truth. And it's like we already had established that slavery is horrific, just like the Holocaust was horrific. And now all of a sudden we're giving opportunities to people to say that it wasn't. That is insanity, and that's what's terrifying to me, where it's like, how do you grow this country into a better space when it seems like in a lot of ways it's being like sucked back into a vacuum? And that's like gives me, it gives me such horror because I don't know what to do, because it's like you have people like us, like we're preaching a lot to the same people who are the same like-minded people. So it's like, how do you get into those minds? And especially like the whole like red pill white man, it's scary that they just like fell into it. And then the whole other conversation about just like white women following along too is horrible. And it's like that's the thing that I think about on the daily basis is how do we stop this cult from continuing?
Real quick, Jazzy has a question for you and I, Nicole.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I have faced a lot of bullshit from a lot of white men for me. Uh, White men, especially on like that side of the fence, they're cowards and they're scared. And all they do is try to put other people down to make them feel better. I'm not saying all men are like that because I'm married to a white man and he is absolutely not like that.
Wow.
But the people that you're talking about, Jazzy, absolutely. It's a lot more of men, but women are way more like sneaky about it, I would probably guess.
Yeah.
No, they are. I mean, we can kind of like pretty much shut this down in a little bow, but little history lesson. White women were actually a lot more tended to be a lot more brutal because the men used to go off and leave the women in charge and they would take over the plantations and things and tended to be pretty insane. That's a whole nother thing. Hey, I ain't your history teacher, so you go ahead and do that for yourself, okay?